Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep into a stack of source material today, specifically analyzing excerpts from Reverend Sun Myung Moon's address on his 60th birthday.
Yeah, that's February 21st, 1980. The title of the address was The Ideal Nation of God and the Power of Love.
Now, the scene is pretty intense. He's speaking at the World Mission Center, and it's being translated by Bo Hai-Pak.
You really have to get the context. He frames this whole period as a global spiritual war. I mean, he's talking about a war over Satan and atheistic communism, so it's not some light happy birthday speech.
Right. And our mission here is really clear. We're not evaluating the doctrine itself. We're here to act as guides, to synthesize the core philosophical and strategic thinking that's being presented.
It's a very focused look. We're zeroing in on this idea of absolute sacrifice and the ultimate goal, which is creating a fatherland of God.
And the hook is fascinating because he doesn't start with some big declaration. He starts with a really surprising personal detail.
He does. It's about his own age, about death, and he explains why he feels compelled to stay on Earth, even though he knows how, in his words, good the spirit world is.
Yeah, so let's start there. He talks about his 60th birthday, which in Oriental philosophy is a huge deal, right?
Right.
It's like completing a full cycle.
Exactly. But he immediately pivots. He talks about this memory he has from childhood of seeing an old man being honored for his 60th birthday and just feeling pity for him.
Pity. Why pity?
Because he saw the man as being near the end of his life. And now he's saying he sees himself in that role. But here's the tension.
The imbalance.
The imbalance, yeah.
Yeah.
He's getting older, his health and energy are naturally declining, but the mission creating this fatherland is just getting bigger and bigger. It requires more energy, not less.
And he puts that question directly to his followers. He basically asks, are you going to be a burden and drag me down, or are you going to, push from behind?
It's a direct challenge, and it's crucial for you, the listener, to get this framing. He's telling them that his physical presence is the anchor. He's the one with the direction.
Without him, he says, their fight would be much more difficult.
Right. So this whole personal, vulnerable opening is really preparing them for the absolutely extreme demands he's about to make.
And the urgency is just. It's everywhere in the text. This is 1980, and he's looking at the world and saying it's deteriorating so rapidly.
He's afraid they can't catch up. He says the democratic world has no direction, and the outcome of the communist world is this huge, terrifying unknown.
This fear, this external pressure, is what he uses to justify the need for total dedication.
Total is the word. He says followers need to be so intoxicated by the mission that they literally forget to eat or sleep.
And this is where it gets really interesting, just the sheer level of commitment he's asking for.
Mm-hmm.
He asked them if they'd be willing to be so exhausted, maybe even feeling sick, and still agree to be. What was the phrase?
To be cranked up with a winch.
Cranked up with a winch, just to keep working for one more moment.
It's an incredible metaphor. It's about using your spirit to just completely override your body's physical limits. He's setting the stage for a state of emergency where normal human needs don't apply anymore.
So, with that level of dedication established, that brings us to the core philosophy. What is this army of followers actually pushing towards?
And that's the main topic, right? The ideal nation of God. He asks this one single question that unlocks everything. What is the one thing God doesn't have?
A nation, a fatherland of his own sovereignty.
Exactly. And from that one idea, he launches into this scathing critique of every nation that exists.
He argues that all of them, their borders, their identities, they all came out of division in the world, usually coming out of war and struggle.
No nation, he says, began purely from love and truth. And he makes it so visual. He says that the national boundaries we see on a map are, quote, stained by the blood of soldiers killed in hostilities.
So his point is that human history itself is fundamentally flawed. It was sown in blood and war, so that's all it can ever reap.
Unless you change the fundamental cause. If history started from lies, then you have to throw out the results and start over with a new cause. You have to restart history from truth.
Which is a monumental task.
Yeah.
And to do that, to make that 180-degree turn, you need a philosophy, a strategy that's just as powerful.
Which he boils down to a slogan: absolute love. A love so powerful that you love even your own enemy.
He positions this as the complete opposite of all that blood-soaked history. I mean, is there any force more powerful than that? That's the question he's posing.
And he claims this power will melt everything. Hatred, borders, ideologies, all of it. And he points to Jesus Christ as the giant who first brought this slogan to the world.
The historical parallel is really key here.
It is. He talks about the hatred between the Roman Empire and Israel. Jesus is killed by his enemy, but what does he do? He prays for God to forgive them.
And the analysis in the speech is that this absolute enemy-loving principle was the only thing that could eventually conquer the Roman Empire, something military power could never do.
Right. And this leads him to his sharpest critique, which is aimed at modern Christianity.
If loving the enemy is the ultimate weapon, why hasn't Christianity already built this ideal nation?
Because, he asserts, it has failed to live up to its own principle. He just lays it out there. He asks, do Catholics love Mormons? Do Jehovah's Witnesses love Methodists?
So he redefines what it means to be a true Orthodox Christian. It's not about your denomination.
Not at all. It's about your practice. Do you love your enemy? He says that is the only true measure of your faith.
And if you can do that, then the vision just gets huge.
Immense. He says practicing this love is the key to uniting all Christians. And once Christians are united, they can then go and unite all the religions of the world.
And that united religious front is the foundation for establishing God's sovereignty on earth.
So you see how a personal spiritual practice scales all the way up to a global geopolitical strategy.
So if the goal is uniting enemies, how does that actually play out in the real world?
Well, this is where the ambition just becomes staggering. You have to remember, he said that right after the huge 1976 Washington Monument rally, the very next rally would be in Moscow.
Moscow, the capital of the great ideological enemy.
The heart of atheistic communism. And he says he wants to go there not with weapons, but with this principle of absolute love.
And the reason he gives is almost playful.
It is. He just says the name sounds like Moscow. It's this blend of prophecy and language and pure strategic audacity, declaring you're going to march on your enemy's capital with love as your weapon.
But to get there, you have to deal with incredible hostility right here, right now. He's very open about that.
Oh, absolutely. He acknowledges his followers are called heretics and that he's seen as an enemy by, well, just about everyone, the media, other churches, the American government.
And he talks about the followers being called brainwashed.
Yeah, and he says that label gets used because the critics just have no logical explanation for that level of devotion for someone going against their family or their government for this mission.
But here's the paradox. His view on all this persecution, it's completely counterintuitive. He says he doesn't regret it.
Not at all. He says the hostility from the media or the government gives him much more to show God as my achievement once it is all over.
So persecution isn't an obstacle, it's an opportunity.
It's reframed as a spiritual opportunity. He argues that if you can just persevere through it with this mindset of absolute love, the persecution can eventually become very sweet. It's how you make friends without fighting.
He tells this really extreme story about it, relating to home church work, that practice of taking responsibility for a neighborhood.
It is extreme. He creates this scenario where a member is working so hard they get physically attacked, kicked, and knocked unconscious.
And the headlines would say, a Mooney was kicked to death.
But then, he says, if that member revives and just goes right back to work, the next headline will say he resurrected. And that act, that sacrifice, restores the whole area.
It's a chilling story. The message is that absolute rejection, if you meet it with absolute love, will create absolute friends.
Yeah. And all of this work, the fundraising, the witnessing, it's often stuff people would naturally hate doing. And that brings us to the most important distinction he makes. The real enemy.
Right, because it's not actually the government or the media.
No. He says the external enemies, even communism, they're all secondary.
The real enemy is internal.
The real enemy, he says explicitly, is anything that your physical body likes. That is the actual battleground.
And he names specific internal enemies to watch for. He warns against things like drug use and tree sex and immorality.
And also what he calls the infiltration of evil ideologies such as homosexuality. But if you follow the logic, why are these things more dangerous than communism?
Because they represent that original flaw, the desires of the body that led to a history based on lies.
Precisely. To build the ideal nation, you first have to build the ideal person by conquering that internal enemy.
So for a follower, the real enemy could be an assignment they hate, like MFT duty, which is fundraising or construction work.
Or that demanding home church work. And the philosophy is brutally simple. If fundraising is your worst enemy, the thing your body hates most, you don't just have to do it, you have to learn to love it.
You have to apply that 180-degree principle of absolute love to the thing you dread the most.
And when you do that, when you conquer those internal obstacles, you generate the spiritual power you need to overcome any external obstacle. The kingdom of heaven, he says, begins inside you at that moment.
So how does he bring this all together for the audience right there in 1980?
Well, he looks out at the crowd in front of him and he declares that the gathering itself is a miniature of the heavenly kingdom.
The proof is right there in the room.
The proof is visible. He points out there are 5 colors of skin from 127 different countries altogether. He's showing him that barriers like race and culture and language, they can be overcome by this principle. They've already done it on a small scale.
And, having proved the concept, he declares that his 60s, the decade that was just starting for him, will be the decade of completion and the decade of fulfillment and perfection.
He's putting a timeline on it, and the ultimate end of that timeline is the restoration of God's fatherland. A world with no national boundaries, all governed by a single heavenly constitution.
And that constitution, he says, will guarantee a real democracy for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness under God.
Right.
And it will establish the basic human right that life is sacred.
So it all ties together. The leader's personal sacrifice justifies the follower's sacrifice. Persecution becomes an opportunity. And the massive global struggle is won through an intense internal battle to love your personal enemy. It's a complete strategic framework.
It's an incredible synthesis of spiritual ideas and massive geopolitical goals. We've gone from one man reflecting on his age to a plan for a new world constitution. So what does this all mean for you, the learner?
I think you have to consider the strategic weight of that 180-degree strategy. We talked about declaring a march on Moscow, not with weapons, but with love. The source implies this is the only path to a victory that doesn't just create the next war. So here's the provocative thought. Does the principle of absolute love stop being an effective strategy when you move it from a personal practice to, say, a massive state-level confrontation? And if it is truly the most powerful force, why do we never see nations even attempt to use it?